Hi, everybody. It's Kelly Amstutz, the genealogy investigator. Today, we are talking about looking behind the lens. If you're anything like me, I love coming across those old photographs of unknown ancestors. I really like to study the photos, look at the features, those silent faces that look back at me. They're usually in the sepia or the black and white. And then there's always various distortions to the images, depending on the age of them. So sometimes I can spend hours just looking at those old family photos, just trying to figure out some kind of clue behind them that might be hidden that I'm just not seeing. I try to think about like what their names are, what their life was like, why they dress the way they dress, why did they take that photo in the first place, and when? What were the times like? How much did that photo cost? All these questions kind of bubble around in my head. But how often do we really stop and think about who was behind the camera? Who was this photographer? Was he a friend of the family? Was he a family member himself? Was he a local photographer that was really well known? These questions really can hold the answers to who and what, even like the when and the wheres. So the strategies here could really help identify who snapped the photos of our ancestors and kind of like what he or she had to say about that experience. Snapshots of history is the first thing I kind of want to touch on. So I want to take a look back at how the photography industry developed. Before the camera came along, our ancestors, they would have had their portraits painted, usually in charcoal, just to be able to capture the faces of that family. Let's just think back about that. That's pretty crazy. So after 1839, the introduction of the mirror with a memory camera, with the metal images and reflective surfaces came about. Anyone could visit a photographer and leave his, and I do air quotes, image for a fraction of the cost of having their portrait painted. So can you imagine, like, that would be huge savings for our ancestors. Early photographers were involved in an array of images. So there's the glass, there's the tin types on iron, there's paper prints. So from about 1840 to about 1880, most of the images taken by professional photographers were in a studio, or by photographers who would travel to rural areas and they would tow their equipment with them. And I'm not talking about like our cell phones. I'm talking about like giant cameras with easels and like it was a big to do. Photographers came from literally all walks of life back then. Some would operate formal studios. Others were just merchants who added studios to their stores to help them earn a little bit of extra income. So George Eastman, some of you might be familiar with his name. He was the founder of Kodak. He really revolutionized photography in 1888. He offered amateurs a box camera model that was preloaded with enough film for 100 photographs. His sales slogan I always find pretty funny: "You push the button, we do the rest." And this was truly what the users did. The camera, it would be sent in its entirety back to the factory once all 100 photographs were used, and there it would be developed. Printing would happen, and then it would be reloaded. Men were responsible for most of the pictures in the first decades of photography, but Kodak did advertise its box camera to women and children alike, which is kind of unique. In 1900, Kodak offered a new $1 brownie camera that was an instant hit, with 250,000 sold in that year alone. This camera, it was an easy to operate camera that children could really easily handle. By the end of the 19th century, the photography scene had really shifted and people started taking their own pictures to capture their everyday lives. They hired professionals still, but it was usually only for like special occasions, much like we do today. So if we apply yesterday's photographers to our family history, learning about our photographers from the past, it can really relate to our family history. So I want you to stop and think about studying siblings and cousins in your genealogy and how that research can really lead to answers about your ancestry. Now, looking behind the camera lens, can also lead you to new discoveries about those people in the photos. This type of research, it really can be beneficial to you because it kind of lets you know, it puts a place and time to your ancestors. It allows you to find even more photographs of your ancestors. You can build family stories a little bit easier, and it provides clues as to your ancestors' social history. And I talk on social history quite a bit because it is really, really important when you're doing genealogy research. In order to place your ancestors in time, when you're looking at those old photos that are within your possession, the photograph should have a photographer's name and address somewhere in the photo imprint. This is just evidence to where your ancestors posed for that photograph. It is not present on all photos, but a lot of them do possess this. You can also find out when the studio was in business, just to kind of discover when a date or a year might need to be determined when that photograph was taken. So looking at the photo's date and time, it really could lead you to make a guess as to what occasion might have prompted that photograph. For example, a graduation could point you to school records for that ancestor. So it really could lead to some more clues. And when you're locating more photographs, you're probably going to find that, you know, there weren't they weren't the only descendants to inherit those family photos. You might be able to use some clues as you start to collect and gather pieces from those photographs, just to figure out who that photographer was that you could reach out to. And then you can also contact other relatives, ask them about, you know, those old pictures they have stored away in shoe boxes and see what they might uncover. You might actually find a whole new generation or even two, you know, who are captured by your ancestors' photographs. Just, you know, it might spark something in them, just like it does within you. So in each, within your search for the old family photographs, you might be able to identify some of your common ancestors, and really find stories that go along with those photographs. I love putting the pieces together. I think that's one of the fascinations for genealogy for me, is building up that story. So even if you don't know exactly who might be in that picture or who took that picture, you can make a pretty good educated guess just by uncovering different clues. Was it the mother and her child snapping the picture on the first day, or mother snapping the picture of her child on that first day of school? Sorry. Can you see like evidence of maybe a lunch pail? Maybe it's a tin lunch pail within the child's hands. Maybe it's a newborn photograph. Maybe the new dad took it. And you can see that because there's hospital bracelets around the baby's foot. So just kind of uncovering those clues can lead to some answers, just and allow you to kind of stand in your ancestors' shoes. It allows you to kind of imagine them as people rather than just names and dates on a piece of paper. This is all really great material for adding to the journals or the scrapbooks, or just details to add to your family history writings or your family tree online. So the photographer that your ancestor chose to use might indicate their social and economical class, or they could even show their cultural background. Photographers that were located in ethnic neighborhoods, they may be your ancestors' folk. So a foreign language imprint on the photo taken in the US might be a clue to immigration. There were a lot of competition among the professional photographers during this time, and it could have prompted them to display pictures of like their most famous clientele. So posing for a prestigious photographer, it really could show social status. Clues in a photo's props and the setting alone can also show status details that you can use along with your census, the tax paperwork if you uncover any property records. Photographers who offered low-cost portraits may not have used the most fashionable accessories, or they might not have set up in the best neighborhoods. So you can use newspapers and local history just to get a better sense of the most affluent areas around the town or the city. All just clues to help you kind of uncover who is behind the lens. Due to photography not being a mass marketed endeavor until the late 1880s, most of the professional photographers would have hauled or handled taking most of the 19th century pictures. There's really plenty of tools and resources in order to trace these tradesmen that are available. that you as a professional genealogist can use. You're going to have to get your investigator hat on, but you can easily track down these photographers in most cases. First, you're going to want to look at the image for a name or an address. This mark is called an imprint, and it is a big clue. Not all photographers left imprints, though, especially on case images such as like the tinny types, the glass images. But a photographer may have etched or scratched his name into the case's metal exterior, the glass cover, the brass mat. So that is something to kind of get out your magnifying glass and take a look. He may have even embossed his information onto the velvet interior. So you definitely want to peel the layers away very carefully. Photographers would sometimes even insert their business cards behind the case images just to identify their work. So imprints on card photographs, which are like the paper prints that are mounted on the cardboard, they can be stamped, embossed, or even handwritten on the mat or the card itself. The simplest imprints feature just a studio name or a photographer's initials. Other photographers, they identified themselves with the name of the studio or the publisher who reproduced and sold photo cards. More elaborate imprints, they could contain a list of the photographer's services and their awards along with their logo. So once you see this type of information, you can consult these sources in order to find out when and where the photographer works. Some resources for tracking down photographers of yesterday, definitely use those resources. Websites are great. Type the photographer's name into the search engine of your choice. Besides biographical data, you're going to find collections of the photographer's images for review, and especially if you turn up a museum catalog, which if you find that, that's amazing. You can also use message boards just to try to uncover further information. Message boards are great, you guys. A lot of people like to connect, and it's a great way to break the ice. Directories are awesome. In most parts of the country, annual directories would list businesses and residents by locality, region, business, or house, much like a phone book does. I don't even know if we have phone books today. I think we have one that comes around once a year. If you know a photographer's name in a hometown, but you don't know the specific address, you can use the city directories that are published around that time that the photographer was in business to try to uncover more about that photographer, maybe his services, maybe where he was located. Local libraries are also great resources because they can help with using those directories if you're unfamiliar. Photographer finding aids. In order to see a directory of photographers and if they exist within your area, you can also consult with the International Compilation of Such Works in Photographers, a source book for historical research by Karl Mautz. You can also visit photographers, which the website is findingphotographers.com, and it's basically just an online clearinghouse of a list of photographers all around the world. So it is a great resource. Mug books, I don't know if anybody's really heard of these. These collections of biographical sketches, they are also called booster books. They would profile prominent individuals who often wrote like their own biographies. If the photographer was well established that you're looking for, he could be listed, and his profile would be outlined with the history of his studio. So they can be a great resource. Census records are always something do not overlook. Look for the photographer in the federal and state census records just to establish when he was in business and kind of to help narrow down the time frame of your photo. I have a tinny type photo that I really have no clue where it was taken. I don't know when. It has no markings on it. It is a mystery, and I'm not even sure if it was taken in Ohio. So it is a huge mystery. But I do check back with the census records often just to see if I can find, an occupation, something that's trustworthy, just to list that artist. And maybe he was a photographer on the side, but his real trade was a store owner. So it can get a little dicey. Definitely, you can enhance your search beyond the portraits by reading about the equipment and the photographer that was taking the photos of your ancestors and what they use. And the newspapers and magazines are also a good resource. They would often carry photography ads. So, there were business news items that would be populated, and then even obituaries. Every once in a while, a newspaper would run a story on a local studio, especially if someone famous had their picture taken there or the photographer used a new process. So with the Kodak camera, who took that photo? Um, when the world moved to the Kodak camera, the possibilities to snap photos without setting up a photography session with a professional photographer became even easier. Here's some tips for uncovering who was behind that Kodak camera. So if you can figure out the date, by knowing the date a photo was taken, you can really narrow down the list of photo snapping suspects. I love that term, who were alive during that time. If the photo predates the box camera's 1888 debut, you can really rule out the idea of a relative taking the snapshot. Although there could be a few exceptions, most people did not own a camera or studio equipment at that time. So it kind of narrows it down a little bit. Identify missing person. The people within the photo obviously didn't take the photo. So check the photographs to see who was present and who was absent, and then try to kind of break that down and see who could have possibly snapped that picture. And then guess the ages. The camera angle can give away hints on the photographer's age. Children would tend to shoot upwards. Adults would tend to shoot at eye level or downwards. To capture oddly angled shots, a friend or sibling may have aimed the camera while being seated on the floor. So just always be mindful of that. If a camera is pointed up and only 3 of the family members, 4 children, are standing with mom and dad in the picture, you might easily be able to identify who the photographer was. Study the props, look at the captions, and check out the setting. Don't forget to carefully read photo album captions, turn over photos in the albums to see if there's any notes on the back, verify whether information that you find, since you can't be sure who wrote the words or how the captions were informed, just try to double check that. Study the photos for details, look at the furniture, look at the background. If there's toys situated in the shot, be mindful of that. Always look at the images to see why the photographer might have positioned a person or the people within the photo into that pose. I do have a great step-by-step photography ID worksheet and quick cheat sheet that I do offer for free. I will put my freebies in the comments below. And then, as always, I do want to note, I'd love it if you would join my mailing list. I send out a newsletter weekly right to your inbox. All I require is your email address. So please join now. That'll be below as well. And then I do have my certificate genealogy course. I have seats available, and I only open it for a few seats a few times a year. So if you are looking to level up and start your genealogy business, the time is now. It's fully comprehensive, A to Z, and I do offer a certificate for your portfolio once you are complete. Everything you need. And then finally, if you are looking for a genealogist, I hope you keep me in mind. I offer personalized research. I offer full service assistance with family trees and pedigree charts. And I also do DNA consulting, which is a passion project for me. So I hope that I can help you find answers to your genealogy and ancestry. If you're looking for some helpful blog posts, please be sure to check out my website, thegenealogyinvestigator.com, and I will talk to you guys soon. Thanks so much.